Welcome in to the DNVR Fantasy Pod with my guys, producer Kale. I took producer Kale's spot. Not in the fantasy world where my teams were disastrous this week. It was not my kind of week. My man Justin Michael here. Justin, how are you?
Doing good, man. My fantasy team is also a disaster. I have no healthy running backs. The trade deadline has passed. There's nobody to add. It's a disaster, but that's just kind of how this portion of the season goes, trying to tread water as long as I can and hopefully sneak into the playoffs.
I have vaunted myself into the number 1 or number 2 seed in all of my leagues.
Ooh, he's doing it. Well, some of this is unsurprising on a week like this. Obviously, injuries have been a mess. But part of it, and I'm the biggest culprit of all, is that guys like Jonathan Taylor blew the F up this week.
Really, this whole season.
Uncontainable. This whole season. I mean, there's legitimate MVP buzz at this point, and they run through the AFC the way they did the Bills. That's not going to sound stupid, and just with a competent quarterback behind them, we're seeing the kind of production. We could take some victory laps. Great week for Kale's guy, Jalen Hurts, the symbol of running quarterbacks. Austin Ekeler, amazing day. But we are not here to take victory laps. We're here to celebrate Jonathan Taylor. What a stud. What more can you say at this point, guys?
Other than we were wrong. Look, I'm sorry. I put my money where my mouth was. I literally traded him earlier this season for a package of Mike Gesicki and Keenan Allen, and I thought that was the move. And I'm still fantasy relevant, but that move should have ended my season.
Yeah. What more can you say? I will never forget your name, because that's what I was doing for years. I would call him like Sunshine, and I will never underestimate your talents. It was a joy to watch you run through the number 1 defense in the NFL by many metrics. That was extraordinary. And yeah, we just had some pretty special performances this week. As I mentioned, Hurts, Ekeler was really spectacular. Some of the film on what Herbert did was just incredible. The Mac Jones takes, I don't know, half decent. Kendrick Bourne, those guys looking good. So, hey, when you are tuning into DNVR Fantasy every week, we might not get them all right in the preseason, but we have you covered. In
it's
other
not
areas,
as if the criticism wasn't warranted, though, right? Like it's not like he's been producing this way his entire career or anything like that. But this season has been a breakout one, and obviously we said he was really overhyped. A lot of fantasy people were tabbing him as like a top 3 fantasy running back. He's obviously been that. He's lived up to it. We were skeptics, but his run, I mean, the last like 8-9 weeks have just been nuts. 13 touchdowns, already has 1,122 rushing yards, both of which lead the NFL. The Colts are, I don't know if they're a contender, but they're a team you have to take seriously in the AFC. The whole problem with the AFC right now is it's just so week to week. Really, the NFL in general, it's tough to say like who's actually a good team. But Jonathan Taylor, man, it's nuts. But he's breaking that trend, right, of Wisconsin running backs that are superstars in college and then go on to just kind of have lackluster NFL careers. I know Melvin Gordon had his moment in the sun, but it was nothing like this.
No, it's a great point. And, I think what Jonathan Taylor, what's interesting that happened with him is he closed out the season last year playing really good, promising ball. Similar to like David Montgomery, right? And both of those we didn't really buy. Montgomery turned out to be true. Jonathan Taylor turned out to be completely false. But it does happen where you start to kind of sleep on guys that performed at the end of the year because your lineup's already set with the guys who are working for you throughout the year. It kind of goes unnoticed. And if you pay attention to some of that end of year stuff, it will pay off. If you just stay true to it the next season. So just bit of a preseason lesson to try and take with us so that our process can be correct next time. Because Jonathan Taylor, not just a mistaken evaluation on a specific, I think a process problem, because the hints were all there at the end of last year. Great play caller, great O-line. The question mark was the quarterback. And as soon as the quarterback checked off enough boxes, he's taken completely off. So yeah. Let's
fantasy related, but real quick, just this Colts team in general, especially with them kind of being featured on Hard Knocks, they're very likable. Like Frank Reich, Carson Wentz, it's a very wholesome group, and it's easy to root for. Especially, I'm not the biggest Urban Meyer fan in the world, and Houston's kind of a disaster. That's them versus Tennessee is going to be fun to watch how it plays out down the stretch.
Yeah, they're crazy likable. Go, Dre.
Well built. Like, they're a fundamentally sound team. And from a fantasy perspective, JT and Michael Pittman, a guy who we were right on and did talk up a decent amount, at least recently, are really making a difference in those skill positions. And look, if Wentz is still a streaming option between the talent around him, the play calling, the O-line, everything we just talked about, JT, and you danced around it just now, Justin, that AFC South heavy schedule, you could do a lot worse than a kind of a backup QB or even a QB1 for you on the low end for the rest of the year.
And it's time to give Frank Wright his credit where credit is due.
Yes.
Look, at this point, we're 3 years in, and he's going to have top 10 offenses with 3 different quarterbacks. That's insane. He deserves to be in that play calling category that we hold Shanahan and McVay and Peyton in regard. I mean, it's time we give credit to Frank Reich, because he's one of those guys. The guy puts up 30-point offenses regularly, and it doesn't matter who his quarterback is.
Broken Carson Wentz, a million years old Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett. Like, they're just
he had a functional offense with Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, he made me believe in Jacoby a little bit. Like, him going to Miami, I was like, maybe that could be bad for Tua. And then you see Jacoby in another system, or even, going back to his time in New England, it definitely wasn't what he was able to do with the Colts. He's a great play caller, and I think he's just a good coach in general. Not that McVay or Shanahan or any of those dudes have locker room issues that I can speak of or anything like that. You can see the Colts like playing for him, and he seems to get the best out of his players, and he's an inspiring leader. It's very, they've had a bunch of them over the years. The Colts have, honestly. They've, Pagano and Tony Dungy to an extent. I think they've done a good job in getting the right guys to lead the ship. But I'm going way into the weeds now, so I'm sorry. Let's bring it back on track and talk about a fantasy perspective.
No, that is something, especially in dynasties, but I think in general, trying to mine good coordinators is absolutely kind of an underlooked part of being a fantasy GM. What's not underlooked is the waiver wire. And amazingly, going into week 12 with just the Cards and Chiefs on bye. So now we're starting to have fewer buys. You can prioritize a few guys. You might not have to go as poo-poo platter wide on your waiver wire, where it's like, well, I don't have viable quarterbacks. I need a defense. I need a kicker. And hey, if I can find a running back and wide receiver, that'd be great as well. Now you can prioritize a few things. We had some breakout performances like Elijah Moore for the Jets. And that carousel at quarterback's been hard to gauge, but a lot was expected of him coming into the season. You love to see him be one of the top performers. We need to start talking about Cam Newton. We have to have that conversation at this point. Standard scoring had a 26-point week and a loss to Washington. And, just in part-time appearance a week prior in the blowout of Arizona, still at 11 points. He's a big factor and could be down the stretch. And then there are other names to get into. But waiver wires, what are you buying right now? What are you prioritizing for, fellas?
Elijah Moore should be priority number 1 for people. I picked him up 3 weeks ago, and he's been a solid scorer for me. His lowest performance over the last 3 weeks in PPR leagues was 13.1. He's obviously went off, had a big 20 5+ point week, regardless of what scoring system you're using this week. But he's been really dependable throughout the quarterback play. He's sort of emerged as the number one option on that offense, regardless. It's nice to see. I've been a guy hyping up Elijah Moore as a fantasy option for like 3 seasons now, so I'm like kind of glad it's kind of finally coming to fruition. And I think that should be priority number one if he's still available in your leagues. But he's definitely startable at flex, if not in a wide receiver 2 position. Maybe not dependable. He probably hit his peak for the season. So if you're a guy who's maybe looking to sell high in a dynasty, I get that. But that would be my priority number one.
Yeah, and seems the Jets offense in general has become way more viable now that Zach Wilson is an under center. I imagine that's hyperbole that for 3 years because he is a rookie.
Yeah,
so I know we
joking.
all
Yes.
think that. Cam Newton, Justin, what are you buying? And dude, injuries with the Cowboys. You've been talking up Gallup. We thought you were a homer. Forget Gallup. Now people need to prioritize Cedric Wilson with Amari Cooper out and CeeDee getting injured against the Chiefs.
That's been the tough part about that Cowboys offense in general, is just they have so many different guys that they can beat you with. I mean, if you have Gallup, it seems like it's going to be a Wilson day. If you have Wilson, it seems like it's going to be a Dalton Schultz day. If it's not, then it's in the backfield. They're loaded. And from a fantasy perspective, that's a little bit frustrating, but it's clear they trust Cedric Wilson. He's been a guy that they've always implemented into the lineup when any of these guys have gone down. Yep. So he has the ability. You know, I got to see him plenty when he was at Boise State. He's a guy that can stretch the field, consistent hands, good athlete. I like him, especially moving forward, because I just think Dallas's defense has kind of come down to life a little bit, and I think they're going to be in some shootouts down the stretch. So I just would like to pick up any of those guys if you have the opportunity. Cam Newton, though, man, I think you have to buy him at this point. It seems like he's a viable. I know long term I don't love it, and obviously he's like a big hit away from no longer being relevant. But if they're gonna give him the red zone touches, and it seems like they're going to, he's gonna pick up a lot of points. I mean, it's kind of similarly to Jalen Hurts, who's proven to be a better passer of the football than I think a lot of people have given him credit for. But you know, ultimately, you just always have the ability to get 10 to 15 points on the ground in any given game, and that's just such a massive upside.
2 massive factors at play with Cam that are right up Kale's alley. It's really 3, and the injuries are the biggest one that Justin just mentioned. The other is that Carolina offense, like when McCaffrey's in, the world opens up. Everyone becomes viable. When he's out, they're very mediocre. And then it's the running quarterback factor that you've been talking up for a couple months now that has proven to be true beyond all doubt this year. If McCaffrey's in and Cam's healthy and can run, I think it's clear, right?
Yeah, I mean, he also looks young. I mean, that's the thing to me, is it matches the eye tests. I'm not worried about him down the stretch. He looks the healthiest he has in years. And the extra time off probably helped with that. And I don't think Carolina's too worried about him going into next year. And with how wide open the NFC is, they view themselves absolutely still in that wild card hunt. I think they're going to use Cam as much as they want to use him in the red zone down the stretch, because they're not worried about his long-term health necessarily, even though there's been reports that they're willing to bring him back next year. So they're going to give him the touches and they're going to use him. So you might as well play him.
At worst, he's what you thought Taysom Hill could be.
Exactly.
Yeah. I just hate that Carolina gets to have this fun storyline. They, like unceremoniously kick him to the curb, take all his pictures down in the stadium. Now you welcome him home and he might lead you to the playoffs. But hey, that's all right. It's fun. It's been a wonky NFL season, and of all the quarterbacks, other than the, maybe Simeon of late or the brief emergence of Mike White, Cam's probably the most viable out of any of the quarterbacks that have just been thrown into the fire.
And we'll save it for the second half, the streaming, because I think there's a few interesting conversations.
There's good options. Yeah.
With some of the guys we talked about last week as well. just closing out the waiver conversation. I think you got to really prioritize Devontae Freeman. Justin mentioned it in the open. Everyone's struggling with running back issues. He does seem to be getting more touches and just be fitting a little more in the Ravens. Also, he's such a tough dude in the red zone. He got a touchdown last week against the Bears. You think that could keep up? Jeff Wilson, San Francisco.
Ty
Injuries
Johnson
keep
with the
happen.
Jets.
Yep. Right. Some people are also saying Tevin Coleman with the Jets just because of injuries, but there is an opening. That's one to monitor. And I'm still seeing like my guy Tyler Conklin still available in a ton of leagues. You got to pounce. And we'll cover more of that on streaming options and stuff. But as all our hardcore fantasy players, listeners know, there's no better time to get in on DraftKings Sportsbook, number one sportsbook in all the land. This Thanksgiving, be thankful for free bets, they say. That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, has a Turkey Day no-brainer you can't miss. New customers can bet just $1 on any Thanksgiving NFL game and win $100 in free bets if your team scores a point. Absurd deal. There you go. Free money on Thanksgiving. Also, anyone who follows this show is going to be tuned in to the props I gave out. Jonathan Taylor over rushing yards. It was set very low. So I gave that on the tailgate. That absolutely murdered. Kale and I had a ton of fun live betting at the bar. The app is phenomenal for that.
I was hitting next score field goal. I hit that like 3 times straight this week and made like $100. It was awesome.
Speaking of live bets, I cashed in big time on CSU down 20 points last night.
Right.
Nice.
I live bet them 4 separate times during that game, all at plus money.
I'm honestly mad you didn't text me because I
should have.
I was working late.
Come through.
I was watching Monday night. The Nuggets were on, or the Avs were on in that insane game. So I was distracted. I was following CSU on my phone, but never even thought of jumping in. All these opportunities. Last year, I paid for my family's holiday gifts with some phenomenal bets. One at DraftKings Sportsbook. It was actually all thanks to my guy, J Mike, because of a great offer that was available for the college football playoffs. Get in, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use that promo code DNVR to get that great offer and win $100 when you bet just $1. They'll also match your first deposit bonus up to $1,000. Must be 21 or older. Colorado only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. All right, guys. Lots to get into still with our streaming options.
I love that graphic.
God, I love that graphic so much. We teased it. Let's stay on Cam Newton because Cam Newton now the number one priority over a guy like Mac Jones, over a guy like Big Ben, who kind of had a renaissance, or even Jimmy G or Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah,
let's include Heineke in that.
Cam Newton number one for sure. Although Jimmy G is playing the best football I've seen him play since they made that Super Bowl run a couple years ago. If he's available, that's not a bad pickup either.
Yeah. Justin, where you at on this?
I lean Cam slightly, I guess. I really like Mac Jones. I don't love the matchup going up against Tennessee. They're not a tremendous defense or anything like that, but they can get after the quarterback a little bit, challenge you. I could see New England kind of going run heavy in this one. Then again, that's like classic Patriots when you expect them to do something to zag the other way and you get a 4-touchdown Mac Jones game.
So this is where these are streaming options, and we also featured Cam Newton in the waiver. Now, Cam does have a bye coming up. So that is going to make it so that you can only start him 2 of the next 3 weeks. Now, the 2 games he does have are against Miami and Atlanta. So that's cash money right now. Mac Jones also has a bye coming up, and he's against Tennessee and Buffalo, and then Indianapolis after that. I don't know that I love that. And as you mentioned, Justin, their game plans can be, it's the Patriots, very specific to the opponent. so they
Where
might
you at
not
on
give
the
you.
Red Rocket? Andy Dalton making his start for Justin Fields on Thanksgiving Day against a poor Detroit defense. They play hard though.
Maybe just for this week. I do want to get into Fields because at least there's no broken ribs. I actually think that's phenomenal for some of his wide receivers like Darnell Mooney, who's still available in a lot of leagues right now. And with Fields, the speedster has just like taken off for the Bears. His production has really taken off. I think Heineke's also intriguing. You get Seattle, the Raiders, who are falling apart, Dallas, who, like, depending on who's out, can really be exploited defensively. So
And they're
he's
awful on
intriguing.
Thanksgiving. Like every year it feels like the Cowboys choke on Thanksgiving.
It's a great point. So Dalton's sneaky, but I just think Cam against Miami has to be the highest. And I think honestly, Kale makes a pretty strong point for Jimmy G against Minnesota. And Jimmy G is gonna play against Seattle and Cincy as well, but then you'll have Atlanta. So he's gonna be a guy that's gonna be frisky as you start to enter the playoffs and stuff.
I like that he has a lot to play for too.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get into streaming defensive options here. This week does get a little trickier. Not a week with a ton of large spreads and potential blowouts where it's like, well, even though, I don't know, Team X doesn't have the greatest defense, they're playing, the shitty Detroit Lions, so we can start them this week. That's not necessarily the case, though. After last night, the Eagles have my attention because they're taking on the Giants.
I've actually started the Eagles defense a couple times in the last several weeks, and they've been scoring points for me. Even last week, even though they let up 29 points, couple of turnovers, they're putting points on the boards with turnovers right now. As far as defenses go, I like the Eagles have my attention too. I also like the Bears. They're available in a lot of leagues because they've been really up and down, and they're playing the Giants. Not the Giants, the Lions, and the Lions are bad, and they might not even have Jared Goff. So.
And if they do, who knows if he can even throw the football? I mean, that last performance against Pittsburgh was tough to watch.
Yeah, for real. Kale, I love that is all in on like fading the Lions on Thanksgiving, which is a grandiose idea. You could even start the Lions D, frankly, against the Bears. If the Red Rockets starting, why not?
Yeah.
He was also awful on Thanksgiving last year with the Cowboys.
So bad.
Low key like the Jets. They're playing the Texans, and Robert Saleh with a different quarterback in there, kind of sneaky. They'll definitely be available.
Frankly, all of these there's two sides of a coin because you could start the Texans defense against the Jets. Whichever side of that game you pick, you probably are going to win. I also think the Texans might be favored in that one, so I like that. One game I absolutely would stay away from is football team 49ers. 49ers was a streaming D I prioritized last week. You're going to have to dump them because any game the Vikings have been in has been an absolute shootout and obliteration. Kale, I hate to do this to you, but I went out of order. Can I ask in these final 5 minutes of show that we do a little stonks now that we've covered our streaming quarterback and defensive options, because there are a couple intriguing wide receiver and tight ends coming into the stretch here, which because of injuries or what have you, are all of a sudden looking intriguing beyond some of those waiver wire pickups that we talked about, like Elijah Moore, Cedric Wilson, and those different running backs who can fit the spot. And if you don't have it, no big deal.
It has disappeared. I don't know what happened to it.
No worries. I want to get into Darnell Mooney. Kind of touched on him. Honestly, kind of spoiled the segment earlier. But Mooney's really ticked up with Fields playing. He's been a top performer. decent production once Dalton came in, but actually Godwin kind of took up some of those touches, assuming with no broken ribs, Fields can come back soon. Are we buying? We're buying that Darnell Mooney will stay where he's at here.
Yeah,
He
I'm
had
in.
16 targets last week.
Yeah,
Scored
that's crazy.
2 weeks in a row. I don't think that's just gonna go to nothing. The lowest amount of targets he's had this year in any game is 4. So
Yep.
like it's clear they prioritize trying to get him the ball. He's averaging about 6, 7 a game. Yeah, I like his stock, and it's just one of those they don't really have that many other options to throw to because obviously Robbins, he's just completely disappeared. But
Right.
maybe they'll get Robinson involved down the stretch. But I like Mooney.
Or even much of a run game to go to. Like they're just kind of okay, time to chuck it up in garbage time because guess what? We're down double digits and we're the Bears. Marcus Valdes-Scantling had a massive week. We've kind of been waiting as like injuries and stuff happen in Green Bay, and you figure out that offense for someone to emerge among the kind of complementary guys. He breaks out 10 targets, 4 receptions, 123 yards with a tud. We buying this?
Yeah, he's my favorite of these options down the stretch of the season by far. Just the upside of Aaron Rodgers' offense, obviously. Also, that defense has regressed quite a bit over the last coming weeks. They're having to throw the ball more, and they're playing from behind more than they were early in the season.
Yep.
Devontae Adams obviously is always going to be the number one option in that offense, but with Robert Tonyan out, MVS is probably going to get some red zone targets down the stretch of this season. And that's all you can ask for.
Really shaping up to be a typical Packers season where A-Rod throws for 375 and 5 touchdowns, and that defense gives up 41 points in the playoffs, and they lose again.
Yep.
Honestly, it's kind of crazy, but I've seen this trend in fantasy before where by week 12, you see guys with real staying power emerge. Cruz, salsa dance, wide receiver for the Giants. He kind of broke out.
I remember that. It was like second half of the season, and then all of a sudden he comes out with like 3 straight, 1,200 plus yard years after that.
Miles Austin, same thing. Was it Miles Austin? Yeah. Breaks, and then Tyreek Hill. I remember picking him up around week 13 or 14 as a rookie in a league where I was getting return yards. So, and I think every wide receiver name we've brought up has real staying power. What about Nick Westbrook? Ekine?
That's how I believe you pronounce Ekine.
AJ Brown injured. Julio obviously on and off. He goes past the century mark. We've seen him kind of produce on and off for the Titans, who have been absolutely destroyed at their skill positions as of late. What do you think? Real staying power here?
I don't know, man. 8 targets last week, but only 5 combined the 3 games before that. I do like that just out of pure necessity, like you said, they're so dinged up at this point, they may have no other choice, but that feels like a bit of a gamble. I like the other guys significantly more that we've talked about at this point.
Fair enough. And the one I'm gonna close out with is Zach Ertz at his new team with the Cards. Now the thing is not necessarily his quarterback long term, but the early returns with Colt McCoy have been very nice. Are you buying it? Is there someone maybe you try to flip quick because you're worried about the chemistry with Kyler? What's your read on Ertz?
He's what their offense was missing, right? Like literally the day they traded for him, I went on this podcast and I was like, really a tight end is what they need. And you guys, well, they just got Ertz.
Right.
It's lived up to the hype. He's producing like he's, vintage Philly Zach Ertz again. And I just think he benefits so much from, they have so much talent on the outside at the receiver position. They've got good running backs who are effective as pass catchers. He's going to get a lot of one-on-one coverage, and he's just one of those guys where it's like he's too strong for most corners, and he still moves well enough that he's tough for linebackers to deal with. And I like his role a lot.
Yeah, he benefits, I think, the most from the presence of Rondale Moore sort of being a cross back receiver in that offense, because it really leaves that middle open, because they're leaving someone almost spying wherever he is on the formation all over the place. And it leaves the middle of the field for these dump offs that Zach Ertz is so. I mean, look at his stat line from last game. I think it was 8 catches for 88 yards. He's really just getting these chunk like dump off plays just one after another. In a PPR league, I love him moving forward for sure.
It's a great point. With that 4 wide offense, you have double slots. A guy like Ertz, Max Williams looked nice to start the season. Ertz, though, from a fantasy production, we've seen it over the last 5 years. When he's on, he's one of those guys in like the true upper echelon. And in this
he's
offense,
kind of doing what Denver wishes Noah Fant would do, right? Like, he's stretching I know that statistically speaking, Noah Fant is up there when you like look at his yards per catch and all that. But I think just from an eye test perspective, what Zach Ertz is bringing to that offense, it's clear. You can see like you have to take him seriously. He, out of everyone we've gone over so far, other than maybe Scantling, who I think, like Kale said, just because the Packers offense has to rely so heavily on the passing game, I think Ertz is probably the most productive of this bunch.
Well, there you go. Week 12 or not, it doesn't matter. The stakes are always high. There are always a ton of opportunities on it. I wouldn't hate going into the playoffs with like 3 of the 4 wide receivers we've talked about, including like Elijah Moore and what have you, and even Ertz. There you go. Best of luck. Set those lineups. 3 Thanksgiving Day games. You know this, but then Thanksgiving comes and you're scrambling for your waiver wire pickups. Get them in now. Thank you all for tuning in. Best of luck. We'll catch you next week.